With April Hazel Weden. Testing 1, 2, 3. How many years have you lived in Auburndale, and how did you come to live here? Okay, we'll start with that.
Well, I came to Auburndale in about 1929. We'd just been married a couple of years, and we had lived in Cambridge in an apartment there, and I had been working. My husband worked in the publishing house, and I also worked in the publishing house. That's where I met him, in Little Brown and Company.
Oh, really?
And then I went to do publicity work for the New England Council for a year or so. But then we decided it was time to move out of the country. And we came to Auburndale because my husband's sister lived here in Auburndale, and she and her husband were very active in the town. And matter of fact, he used to coach a group of amateur players at the Auburndale Community Club. They put on plays. We used to come out a great deal, and it was very popular at that time to have these little theater groups in the different villages in Newton. Mm-hmm. And so we came out and met a lot of young people our age, you see, at that time. So we decided it was a nice place to come to. So we moved out here and rented an apartment.
Now, how old were you at that time?
How old was I? Let me see. I was about 27. About 27, I guess. And there was a wonderful group of young people here at that time of our age and our interests and that sort of thing. And they used to have dances at the Auburndale Community Club, which is the place where they gave the plays too. And about once a month they'd have a party, perhaps a supper and a dance. That's what you want. And that was a wonderful way to get acquainted, because it was open to everybody in town, and that's the way most of the new people who came to town in those days got acquainted. The men had a bowling league, and the women's club met there too. But this Auburndale club, all those events were the things that we enjoyed very much. And
it wasn't like that in Cambridge?
Oh, no. Well, Cambridge was a nice place to live because there was always something going on there. I mean, always something courses that you could take, or lectures or concerts you could go to. It was an entirely different life. But you might not even know the same people in the building that you lived in, in the apartment at that time. So it wasn't the kind of place that you could get acquainted so easily. I think perhaps it's more so now than it was then. But here, see, Auburndale also was a little different from the other Newtons because it had all the characteristics of a small town. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a small town government, but we had aldermen, and it was a very civic-minded place too. Auburndale was always one of the first ones to get the Red Cross all done, and then the community fund, and that sort of thing. As I say, it had the virtues of a small town, and yet it was near a city. You see, the other Newtons, like Newton Center, those are nice places to live too, but they're much more divided. You know the people on your street, or in your area, but you don't know everybody in Newton Center. And here, when we first came, you knew practically everybody in town. And also, you get acquainted with not just people your own age, but older people too. You see, all these big houses that are up here on Woodland Road, all the great big houses up there. Some of them belong to LaSalle now, but they, this was a little before our time, but they had all belonged to old families, and families who had quite a bit of money, and they could afford to have servants and that sort of thing. Well, of course, when it became difficult to get servants, they sold off those houses, and LaSalle bought some of them. But it was the kind of town that had a solidity to it, It wasn't, I don't mean to say that it was a wealthy place, but there were the people who had money in Auburndale at that time as somebody had called it, very quiet money. it wasn't a splashy place, you know what I mean. People were very much more interested in their church activities and that sort of thing. They're very quiet. It was a very quiet place. Also, we thought it would be an awfully good place to bring up children, because we were planning to have some, of course. And the schools in Auburndale at that time, the Williams School, was supposed to be the very best school in all of Newton. It had some perfectly wonderful teachers there. Now, both our children went through Williams School. Well, we moved out of that apartment up to an apartment up on what is now called Pigeon Hill. Part of it's been taken for the turnpike. But that was a little off the beaten track street, where there again the children could play without danger. And we had two children. We had a boy and a girl first and then a boy. We named them Faith and Charles Jr., whom we called Fritz. And they both lived up to their names. Well, another way we got acquainted, of course, was in our church activities. People in those days, I think, went to church a lot more than they do now. And there were young people and older people there too, and there were church activities and all. And so we found it very easy to become acquainted, and really felt it part of the town.
What church did you belong to?
The Auburndale Congregational Church. It's a very old one, a very nice old one. Well, in 1940, we bought this house. And this house is 100 years old.
Oh my.
It was interesting. Before we bought it, an architect had redone the whole front of the house, changed it completely. It was like some of the other houses up the street here that have big porches, you know, that sort of thing. And he fixed it all up, and he entered his before and after pictures in the Good Housekeeping magazine and won the first prize. Oh. That was before. We had nothing to do with that. That was all done before we bought it, you know. But that's why it looks colonial on the outside, but it's really Victorian, you see. It's 100 years ago. And one of the people from the Jackson Homestead had looked it up for us, and they found that it was not on the map. It was not on the 1870 map, but it was on the 1880 map, so we know it was built somewhere in those 10 years. And several of the other houses are here too. So it's out of tradition, and I like old things. I like tradition. Well, after we moved here, we of course kept on with our activities in town, but they changed a little bit because they're a little older. The children, we followed the children along, and we didn't have any active PTA in those days, but we had visiting days at school, and we were very much a part of the Williams School at that time, you know, as parents supporting things. That's another thing about Auburndale. It's a very supportive place. You know what I mean? The groups of people. If somebody's ill, everybody in town would help. Send food in. If somebody dies, everybody pitches in and helps, you know, helps the family out and all that sort of thing. And that's because I think it is a small town, and you're more apt to know your neighbors. It's changed now. It's grown bigger, of course, and lots of new people have come in, and the community club is not as functional as it was. Well, it isn't functioning anymore at all. And so I think it must be a little more difficult for young people to get acquainted now than it was then. But in those days, it was very nice. And I belonged to the garden club. As a matter of fact, I became president. I was the first president of the garden club after it broke away from the women's club. It was just a committee, the women's club, before that. And when it became, they decided to have it as a separate club. And I was the first president of it, not knowing very much about what I was doing. But I said, I don't know very much about gardening, but if you want somebody to push women around, I'll be willing to do that. And then we were very active at the church too, and we put on a lot of things. And a friend of mine and I wrote some skits, little reviews, you know, and that sort of thing. We had a great time putting all our friends into these acts. We had one that was a tour around the world. It was supposed to be on shipboard, you see, and then different acts as we stopped in different places. We even had somebody have a gondola ride, you know, walking with their feet down through. They had constructed a gondola, but they walked, you know, and silly things like that. But we had a great time. And then I was very active in the Girl Scouts because Faith was in the Girl Scouts. And I was on the Newton board. I was secretary of the Newton Girl Scout board, and then I became vice president. But by the time it came time to be president, I had started to teach at LaSalle, so I was not president. But I enjoyed that. That gave us a little more of less of a local outlook, you know, a little more of the entire city of Newton. And then, of course, the war years broke in about 1941, you know, with Pearl Harbor and all, and we were busy. We were very busy, and we walked everywhere. We had rationing, you know. We had gas rationing. We had coupons. We had to save our gas, and we did because we were younger. Then we could walk a little bit better than we do now. But we walked everywhere, and our house heating and all, we kept that as low as possible. And then we had ration cards for meat, especially meat. And when you went to the store to buy a leg of lamb, it took a lot of your little
slips.
Yes. So that you had to be careful. You had to plan things. I think the chicken was not rationed, I think, as I remember it, but any kind of meat you had to give red stamps for, and green stamps for, or blue stamps, I forgot what the color was, for canned vegetables and that sort of thing. So that we, even though we weren't in the war, our husbands were too old to go to the war by that time. But we had several friends whose husbands went to war, and they were left here with children. And there again, the town, as a supportive kind of place, helped them. There was one family in particular, I remember, whose one of the children came down with polio while the husband was away. And the wife was writing a letter to her husband every single day, you know, and not mentioning polio. And the whole town rallied around her and helped, took toys up and records up to the child, you know, and all. And he was out in the Pacific, the husband was. Mm-hmm. They just lived up the street from us, yeah. And he found out through somebody, but it was after a couple of years or so. But that's an example of living in the town.
Mm-hmm. Did you do any volunteer work during the war years?
Yes, we did, not in hospitals or that sort of thing, because we had small children at home, you know. We couldn't leave them for that length of time. But we did a lot of bandages and raising money. We had several events to raise money for the war effort, and our children bought war stamps, savings stamps, you know, to help. And we all bought bonds, war bonds, as much as we could. Of course, that was helping ourselves as well as the war, but it was all we could do. There wasn't very much else that we could do. We were active in drives for the Red Cross and that sort of thing, you know. It was mostly, at my age then, mostly raising money, activities to raise money for the war effort, for one thing or another. service organizations, the Red Cross, that kind of thing, you know. So, but it was mostly trying to do without. I think that was our chief effort, and then writing letters and that kind of thing.
So it seems like the warriors were hard, but living in a community like Auburndale made them a little bit easier. Being the close community, it would
made it much easier because you didn't feel in Auburndale at that time. I don't think any family could possibly feel alone. I say it was so many people in the church or the community club or just in your neighborhood who helped. Everybody helped everybody else. It really did. And it was a good place to bring up children because all the children in Auburndale who went up to Williams School and the Burr School too, there were 2 schools, but we lived near the Williams School, we're all on an equal level. It didn't matter whether their family had money or not. There was no ostentation at all. And there was no emphasis on that sort of thing. The emphasis was on doing a good job in school and play groups and Girl Scouts and things like that, you see. So that it was an awfully good place to bring up children. I think they got a lot of good sound values about what's important in life from living in Auburndale. And as we've seen our children grow up and have seen how they've married and what they've done here and there, you know, I think that it shows, it really does, that that's the kind of bringing up you'd like to have for your children.
Now, did they stay in this area? Do they still live in Auburndale, or do they live nearby? Or?
No, you'll be amazed when I tell you about my son. He's about as far away as anybody could be at this moment. He's in North Yemen.
Oh my!
Well, after he graduated from Weden, he went into the care, you know, the care packages. No, I mean he went into the Navy, and as they all had to do in those days. And while he was on the ship, he helped the chaplain on the ship distribute food and clothing to some of the islands, particularly Crete in the Mediterranean. And he got an interest in that sort of thing. And so when he got out and was ready to find a job, he said he didn't want an office job. He wanted to do some good in the world, get out and do something of that sort. So he went with the CARE organization, care packages. And his first post was in Haiti. And from then on, he's gone to several places all over the world. And then he got about as far as you could go in care. You get to be the head of a mission, and then you can't go any farther. You just are the head of another mission. So he went with the government, and he is now with the AID program under the State Department. That's the Agency for International Development. It's really foreign aid. And he's been 5 years in Egypt, and now he's in North Yemen. And we were quite worried at the time of that earthquake, you know, just this last year. But they were safe. We heard from the State Department that they were safe, which helped a great deal. But I guess it was a devastating experience for the Yemeni people. But he gets home once a year. Well, it's every 2 years, really, but I think when they have a post so far away, they're allowed to come home every year, so we expect that they'll be home. He's married and has 2 children, and they'll be home this summer. My daughter lives in Lexington, so we see her. That's nice. And she has 2 grandchildren. And one of our grandchildren lives right on the edge of Newton now. He's married, and right on the edge down near the reservoir.
Oh, yes.
Down near Boston College. As a matter of fact, I think maybe his wife goes to the church there at Boston College, I think. And so it's nice to see them. And the daughter is not married, and she works in Washington for the IBM people. So we're very fortunate in our children.
So they had a good upbringing in Auburndale, then, it seems.
And then at LaSalle, you see, I joined LaSalle in 1948. They wanted, I went up there one time to see if they wanted any teachers. I went up and offered to teach Latin because that was my minor in college. And found to my surprise, not my surprise really, but I found that they didn't teach Latin anymore. But said, how about English? I said, well, that was my major. So they called me up and said, we think our English classes are too large and we're going to take a few out of each division and make a new division. Would you take a part-time job? So it's right there, right across the parking lot from me. So I said, sure, I will. And the only teaching experience I'd ever had was when I was in college. We went up, they needed some part-time teachers up at the Norton High School. And I went up and taught Latin up there, one class in Latin. That's the only teaching experience I'd had. I'd taken education, of course, and proper courses and all. But as I was saying to you over the telephone, nobody tells you how to teach freshman English. In any English course, you just, I think anything is grist for your mill, too. You can talk about anything as long as you can get them to write and express themselves. Well, I had quite a good experience up there. The girls were very cooperative. They really were, because the rules were very strict in those days, not like today. And the atmosphere was a little different. But I don't think they were all quite as eager to go on and get into college. A lot of them were just spending 2 years and then going to get married, you know. I think they're a little more serious about it now, really.
Did the college nearby have an effect on you in the years before you taught there, say when your children were growing up, or did the college really influence your living right here at all, or?
Well, it was pleasant to live here with the LaSalle campus right behind us, you know. It made it very, very pleasant. But the college activities, once in a while, we'd go up there to something, but the college was really very separate from the community. People really weren't involved in it at all. And as a matter of fact, that was one of the things that fell to my lot when I was up there, because the president asked me, after I'd been up there a few years, if I would start a concert and lecture series. And I did, and that was great fun, because we tried it one year, and then it was so successful because we invited all the townspeople to come free, you see, to it. It was awfully good public relations. They don't do it now, and I wish they did, because it really was very good for the whole town. It was the only contact, really, the town had with LaSalle. And the townspeople turned out in droves for it, because we had people like David Brinkley and outstanding newsmen like that, and Harvard professors and some musicians. We tried to have both music, and it was quite successful. I think we used to get about a quarter of the student body, which was, I think, all right for those days. It wasn't as many as I wanted, but the girls were busy.
Now, did you go into Boston a lot during,
Yes, we used to go into Boston quite a bit, and go in shopping in the stores, and also we'd go into plays. And we went to symphony. We used to go to Saturday night symphonies, and we think nothing of going in on the train. We didn't drive in. We'd go in. Sometimes we drove in, but usually there were so many trains in those days, and buses and that sort of thing. Many more than there are now. There are only trains here. But
the transportation was better then?
Yes, transportation was much better then. than it is now. And the trains would run so that you could go to the theater and come home on the train and leave your car up to the station, and drive home, that sort of thing, or walk home. Yes, we went to Boston a great deal. We don't ever go to Boston now. If we go to Symphony, we go on the Symphony bus that goes right from Newton, And I think, one thing was, of course, that we didn't have the shopping centers. You didn't have Chestnut Hill. And now, if I want to go shopping, I go to Chestnut Hill, or I go to Wellesley, or I go to Waltham, or the stores right around here. So I don't feel the need to go to Boston anymore. And the theater has become so expensive in Boston that not many of us go anymore. When you have to pay, was it $30-$35 for a ticket? There hasn't been very much that's worth that, really. But we still do enjoy the Symphony. We go to that.
Did your husband commute into Boston to work?
Yes, he did. He worked for D.C. Heath and Company, textbook publishers. He was a college textbook editor. And sometimes he'd take trips around the country trying to finding a professor who would write a book, and that sort of thing. And he would go in on the train in the morning and come out on the train at night. It was bad weather. It was just up the street here, but if it was bad weather, I'd meet him in the car. And he was active with the men in Auburndale, and the different things that they did. Well, mostly we did things together. I think we didn't do so much separately. And he worked on drives like the Red Cross and things like that, and the community fund and that sort of thing. And helped me, and when I was teaching English, he could bring home textbooks, for me. I thought you might be amused at one thing that I remember while I was teaching up at LaSalle. A girl who had been out of LaSalle about 10 years came back one day, and she came in to see all the teachers, and she came in to see me. And, I was always needling the girls and saying, now, do some good in the world. Get out and do some good in the world. Don't become just a housewife and that sort of thing. It's all right to be a housewife and bring up your children, but don't let that be the end-all and be-all of your existence. And she came back one time. She said, oh, Mrs. Weden, she said, I'll never forget something you said one day in class. And I thought, it took with one, she's going to tell me she's discovered Henry James or something like that. She said, Mrs. Weden, one day in class you said, you'll never get to heaven on a clean house. And I was a little bit taken back, I think, but some of my friends have said, well, I don't know, but that's a good thing for her to remember. I meant to get out and do some good in the world, and not be one of these housewives who's got to have her house so immaculate that she hasn't got time for anything else.
So now you didn't work until about 1948, is that right?
Yes, I waited till I felt my children could stand it if I left the house for the day.
Now, when you first moved to Auburndale, were you still working then?
No, I stopped working in my job in Boston, and because we decided to be suburban. And bring up a family. And when our children were little, matter of fact, I didn't go up to LaSalle until they were in the last years of high school, because I thought a mother should be at home when her children came home, that sort of thing. And most of our friends did too. But when it got time to have two children go to college, things were getting pretty expensive then, and so I thought if I could do something to help, it would be fine. And so and not only that, but I enjoyed it very much. I love to cook, and I like my house, and I love to entertain, but I don't want to just do housework all the time. So I enjoyed the mental stimulation of it, you know. And it was fun to see things happen to some of the girls up there too, because some of them came thinking, oh, they just wanted 2 more years of education, or they would just take the secretarial course because we'd go out and get a job. And then to see sometimes a spark, and several girls decide they'd change into the liberal arts program and then transfer to other colleges and do well and go on with education, and now and then, you know, to read a book. That sort of thing. It was fun to see that happen, and that's why a place like the Self, I think, it supplies a great need. If you want to go to Radcliffe or Boston College or some of the Ivy League 4-year colleges, that's fine. You're that type of person. But if you think you don't want to, and you haven't done awfully well in high school, you haven't cared about being a student, you know, you can't get into those places. And if you've got a decent enough record, you could, just an ordinary record, you can get in here at LaSalle. And then, as I say, you see girls find themselves and and get some kind of desire for more, to know more education, more training, and to go on. And so it really it provides a great incentive, I think, for a lot of girls who couldn't get into the difficult 4-year colleges, and then some of them end up in those colleges. We've had girls who've transferred from LaSalle to places like Weden.
Your school?
And Smith, and we had one girl when I was there, I know, transferred from there and went to Vassar, and when she graduated, she got the economics prize. So I can say a good word for it, for LaSalle, because I've been retired from there now since 1971.
Now, it seems like even for such a small place, education was very good in Auburndale. Then for both grammar schools and, you know, having a place like LaSalle.
It was. There was and the type of people who lived here at that time were the kind who furthered that sort of thing, and the Williams School certainly did. I don't know about the Burr School. I know that was a good school too, because all the Newton schools were considered some of the best in the country, you know.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were. A lot of people have come to Newton just because of the reputation of the schools in Newton. And Auburndale, that Williams School had the reputations, I think I said, as being just about the best grammar school in Newton. So there was an emphasis on education. That's one of when we got that questionnaire every year from City Hall about what you like about Newton and what you don't, and so on, and why do you live here. So we've always written down that we like the quality of life here, which has a great deal to do with education. And since then, of course, I think we've all been interested in politics a great deal, supporting different candidates and that sort of thing. There's been quite a bit of political activity now. There wasn't so much when we were younger, but now there is a great deal. You know, we all got out, most of my friends got out and worked for Bonnie Frank, and
I heard that there was a place called the Totem Pole. Could you tell me something about that?
Yes, that was a great place. That's where the Hotel Marriott is now. It was Narrabega Park, and the park wasn't much of a park, you know, really, but it was a nice recreational spot. And the Totem Pole was a dance hall, and it was run extremely well. And we used to have dances up there now and then, but for the most part, when our children were in high school, we didn't hesitate to let them go there because it was so well protected and taken care of. They wouldn't allow anybody in there who wasn't completely sober. If they thought anybody had been drinking, they were bounced right out of there. And so you could let your little freshman girl go with a boyfriend. Oh, they never went, and they didn't let any stags or any single girls go there either. You had to go in couples, and it closed at I think it closed about 12 o'clock at night too. But it was so very well run that we all felt that we were very fortunate to have that there. We were all sad when it was all torn down, and then they built the Marriott. Because things are different now. The rules would have been lightened up, I'm sure, if it was run now. But in those days, it was very good.
Now, what other places would you have gone to around, in Auburndale for recreation, say?
Well, there were tennis courts. A lot of people played tennis. They had a group at the Auburndale Club which played badminton, too, a great deal. And let me see, for swimming, that kind of thing, we'd have to go over to Newton Center to Crystal Lake if you wanted to swim around here. And then of course the Newton YMCA had classes for the children. And of course the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts were always going off camping to their camps right outside of Newton. And so they had that kind of experience too. And let me see, I can't think, most of our recreation was really just social activities, having your friends to dinner or they played a lot of bridge in those days. They used to have bridge parties around people's houses. And I think that was about it.
Now, when your children were growing up, what were the years, would you say, most, like when they were born? Were they born in the 30s, late 30s, or early 30s?
Well, you mean the difference in ages between the two children?
No, basically when they were born, when they were growing up, through the first 20 years of their life, that was between the early 30s and the...
Oh, yes.
50s.
Yes, they were born in, Faith was born 32 and Fritz was born 36. So that when they were growing up, it was the 30s and 40s, up through the first part of the war, I would say. Because they went off to college Faith went off to college in 50. And then Fritz went to prep school. He was having too good a time at Newton High, so we finally... Newton High was very big. It was an awfully good high school, if you could take it. But there seemed to be a thing among the boys at that time that, you did anything rather than let anybody know that you had a brain, The football star was the one that was admired the most. And consequently, if you wanted your child to get into college, you had to do something about it. So we sent him away to prep school for 4 years. And as he said, if there were only 7 people in your Spanish class, you had to be prepared. You couldn't go to a class that had 25, and take a chance. So that was how he got into college. I don't think he would have otherwise, because he wasn't an A student, but he was a good student, a good average student when he put his mind to it. But that was one of the few criticisms I'd have over Newton. The Newton schools at that time, the high school particularly, it was wonderful for the A student, A-B student, and awfully good for the trade school kind of thing. But the C student, who could do better, that was a real lack down at Newton High School in those days. They somehow or other there was a gap in there.
Maybe you could talk a little more about the neighborhood and what went on in the neighborhood back then.
Well, there were enough children around in Auburndale so that they were never lonely. They could always find a group their own age. And right on this street here, I remember Fritz had, there were 4 or 5 boys about his age that would just play around together. Sometimes they'd play baseball out on the field, on the LaSalle field here, or they'd ride their bicycles around a lot, and they did the usual things boys did, and climbed the trees and scared us all to death, that kind of thing.
But you weren't afraid for them to go wandering about the neighborhood or anything?
Well, they didn't wander very far away, unless if they had a particular friend. Of course, after they got to junior high, over here at Warren Junior High, then they had friends in other places rather than just Auburndale. They'd go to West Newton to play with a friend for the afternoon, that kind of thing. But they didn't just go wandering around looking for trouble. They had a good time, but we usually knew where they were and what they were doing. Just automatically. We weren't, I think, very strict. I don't think we were any stricter than parents are today, maybe, but there's much more of a feeling of individuality and rebellion and rebelliousness, I guess, today. Now, I don't know, maybe it's good. Maybe they grow up a little faster, being a little bit more on their own. But I think they grew up all right.
Now, you and your husband seem to be very involved in social activities and everything. That included, neighbors directly around here, too?
Yes, some people, not necessarily right on our street, because there might be people of different ages, There would be older people and younger people and that sort of thing. A lot of older people lived in these big old houses around here, But we had friends all over Auburndale. Within that area, most of our friends, we hardly ever, sometimes we'd have some business friends in some other part of Newton or somewhere else where we'd go for dinner and perhaps play bridge for the evening or that sort of thing, or just talk. My husband and I didn't care much for bridge. We'd much rather sit and talk with people. So we didn't have very many bridge parties. When people came to our house for dinner, we talked and enjoyed that. But that was it. The emphasis was really on the homes and family life. And yet, it seems to me, as I look back on it, we had some awfully good times. And of course, the parties up at the church, and it sounds as if we were ardent churchgoers, and we were not unusually so, but it was a place where you saw all your friends and your children, who I even taught Sunday school for a while up there, because we tried to follow our children along. You see, when they were little, we did the things that we were the parents for those groups, and when they were in junior high, we were in parents like the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, and that sort of thing. So we tried to follow the activities along.
Now, how long were you involved with the garden club?
Oh, for quite a long time. I still belong to it, as a matter of fact. I still belong to the Auburndale Garden Club, because that was nice, because it, we took courses. We went in Boston when I was president at that time, we went in Boston and took lessons and took courses in flower arranging and that kind of thing, which was a nice artistic activity out of the home, and completely different from anything else that we did. And matter of fact, a friend and I, we even entered some things in the Boston Flower Show that time. We were very active and had a garden in there and on exhibition, and put arrangements in. And then we'd have our own little flower shows here in Auburndale, open to the public, so that those things, there were a lot of artistic activities that went on here too. I remember we had a class in painting trays, that kind of thing. It's coming apart now, but it's, we gathered together in the morning, and it was so nice because you could just concentrate on paint and color and something pretty, and you didn't have to think about any of the problems of life. You just escape from the problems of life. There's been a great deal of emphasis here in Auburndale on that kind of thing. They've had classes with an artist who taught a painting class at one point. Our group belonged to that. And I believe that, matter of fact, there still is a group that have a poetry group of writing poetry. They meet together. So there's always been an emphasis on the arts here in Auburndale.
And at the beginning, you mentioned there was a little playhouse type thing. Were you involved with that, or?
Yes, it was a community house, which is now the Turtle Lane Theater. It was the community house where we had dances and that sort of thing. And I think I said in the beginning that my brother-in-law coached plays there. Mm-hmm. And so we used to put on little reviews and that sort of thing, and had fun doing it. They did a wonderful series of plays there every year.
Let's see, check our tape.